Hello there, just before we kick off today's video, I do want to give a quick plug to a brand new channel that I have called Into the Shadows. If the name doesn't give it away, the channel is very much focused on the darker side of everything. Early episodes have covered things like how we fight the world's deadliest disease, how the Congo suffered the worst of colonialism, and how the Nazis escaped Europe to South America on the rat lines. So if you like to explore the darker side of history and science, please check out Into the Shadows. There is a link below. And now, today's video. Every February the 15th, the people of Tanna, an island in the South Pacific archipelago of Vanuatu, gathered to take part in a strange ritual. In a display that would not look out of place at a 4th of July celebration or Super Bowl halftime show, an American flag is reverently carried into the village square and raised up a bamboo flagpole. Then, as the stars and stripes flap in the breeze, a company of 40 men with the letters USA painted in red, white, and blue across their chests and backs shoulder bamboo rifles and perform precision marches and drill routines before the village chief. This elaborate ceremony is performed in honor of Jon Frum, a mythical American soldier who, it is believed, will one day return to Vanuatu and bring its people vast resources and wealth. The Jon Frum religion is one of the last remaining examples of cargo cults, a curious spiritual movement born of the often turbulent collisions between industrialized Western nations and the peoples of the South Pacific. While long dismissed as primitive, superstitious nonsense, cargo cults are in fact sophisticated belief systems that reveal much about the cultural and spiritual disruptions wrought by colonialism and the determination of Pacific Islanders to preserve their traditional cultures. First coined in 1945 by Norris Mervyn Bird, an administrator in the then Australian territory of Papua, the term cargo cult is derived from the New Guinea pidgin or Tok Pisin word cargo, a catch-all term for commercial goods. When the people of New Guinea and other Pacific islands first encountered European explorers and traders in the 18th and 19th centuries, they were astonished by the sheer quantity of manufactured goods they brought with them, such as clothing, metal tools, medicine, and weapons, especially firearms. As the Europeans began trading with the islanders, these Western goods became increasingly fetishized and began feeding into and altering traditional social structures in unusual ways. At the time, many traditional South Pacific societies were characterized by big man political systems in which prestige and status were determined by how many gifts one could distribute to the rest of the community. Those who could give generously were respected as big men, while those who could not reciprocate were considered garbage men. In the face of European colonizers with their seemingly endless supply of goods, which the islanders could not hope to match, these societies began to feel like they had all suddenly become garbage men. Admiration of the Europeans soon turned to resentment, and the islanders came to believe that the Europeans' endless cargo was actually meant for them, but was being selfishly withheld by the colonists. Cargo cults thus emerged in order to secure said cargo for the islanders, allowing them to finally expel the colonists and enter a new golden age of material prosperity. The trouble was, no one had ever actually seen the Europeans manufacture their cargo, leading the islanders to assume that they possessed some kind of magic that spontaneously made the cargo appear by ship or airplane. As we shall see, this belief resulted in the development of some truly bizarre rituals. The earliest recorded cargo cult was the Tika movement, which arose on the island of Fiji in 1885. The movement was led by Tuka, a spiritual leader who claimed to have visions or myth dreams which revealed to him the path to his people's salvation. By returning to traditional morality, rejecting colonial ideas, and adopting other dramatic cultural reforms, Tuka believed the people of Fiji could regain their lost ancestral potency or mana. In this respect, the Tika movement was similar to the ghost dance movement which swept the indigenous peoples of the western United States 5 years later. Started by Northern Poet spiritual leader Wavoka, the ghost dance galvanized resistance against the American government among western indigenous tribes like the Lakota, ultimately contributing to the famous massacre at Wounded Knee on December 9, 1890. However, the first well-documented case of an archetype cargo cult was the Vailala Madness, which began in Papua New Guinea in 1919. This incident was vividly described by Danish adventurer Jens Bjerre in his 1956 book, The Last Cannibals. The rumour spread that a big ship was on the way to them from the spirits in heaven, fully loaded with tobacco, cloth, preserves, electric torches, knives, axes, and with rifles and ammunition too, it was said later. The weapons were to drive the whites out of the country so that they couldn't steal any more of the goods that were intended for the people. Some dark night, or rather, the natives would imagine they saw a ship nearing the village from the sea. They would run out of their huts, swing burning torches, and shout and scream in hysterical excitement. They completely lost their mental balance, and these fevers of hysteria could last for several weeks, even months. The whole rhythm of daily life of the village was disrupted. The fields went untended, for now it was not necessary to work in them anymore, for all they needed was on the way. In some places, they even started to build large huts to store the goods when the ship arrived. In the huts, they put stones, sticks, and piles of leaves as symbols of the guns and goods they expected. Other reactions were even more extreme. In certain places, islanders destroyed their crops, burned down their villages, and slaughtered all their pigs, believing that infinite quantities of food and other goods would soon be arriving from their ancestors. Unsurprisingly, this cargo never came, and many of these people starved to death. The greatest single wellspring of cargo cults, however, was the Second World War, which saw hundreds of thousands of American troops descend upon the islands of the South Pacific. And with the troops came the cargo in truly staggering quantities the islanders could scarcely have imagined. Landed by ship or dropped by airplane, a seemingly endless supply of trucks, radios, clocks, medicine, tin food, chocolate bars, Coca-Cola, and other exotic goods flooded onto the islands, a great quantity of which was sold or given to the natives by American GIs. Thousands of Pacific Islanders were also employed in the construction of airfields and other military infrastructure, further exposing them to the wonders of industrialized American life. But when the war ended in 1945, the airfields closed down, the Americans left, and the cargo stopped arriving. Desperate to get it back, the islanders began imitating various American practices, which they believed to be magic rituals that made the cargo appear. In one famous case, cargo cultists constructed an entire full-sized mock airfield, complete with runways, taxiways, dummy aircraft, waiting rooms, and a control tower with a bamboo antenna, manned day and night by a radio operator wearing dummy headphones. Other groups built mock harbors to entice cargo ships, while still others, like the aforementioned Tanner Army of Vanuatu, recreated the marching and drill of American soldiers in an attempt to summon the coveted cargo. Other American symbols, including cross-shaped grave markers, are also common fixtures of cargo cult installations. It is around this time that various cargo cults also acquired their own messiah in the form of Jon Frum. Likely deriving from an unknown US serviceman's introduction as Jon from America, Jon Frum is described as a white American GI who will one day return bringing vast amounts of cargo and prosperity to the South Pacific. Many islanders claim to have seen this messiah while intoxicated on a local drink called Carver, while over the years several spiritual leaders have claimed to be the physical incarnation of Jon Frum. Such cults have had a powerful impact on the culture and politics of the region over the last 75 years. For example, when the elections were held for Papua's House of Assembly in 1964, the inhabitants of New Hanover Island decided that their candidate should be none other than US President Lyndon B. Johnson. The islanders refused to pay their taxes and instead took up a collection to entice the president to run for them. To their great but inevitable disappointment, LBJ failed to turn up. In 1957, Jon Frum followers formed their own political party in order to oppose the creation of an independent nation of Vanuatu. Such independence, they feared, would result in a centralized Western-style government and the erosion of traditional customs. The party still exists and will celebrate its 65th anniversary in 2022. Indeed, though numerous cargo cults sprang up throughout the century in New Guinea and the surrounding islands, including the Turagan Nation, the Fifth Cargo Belief, and the Kivung Baining, the Jon Frum cult of Tanna is one of the few still going strong, counting nearly half of Vanuatu's 20,000 citizens among its members. Perhaps the strangest cargo cult of all, though, belongs to the residents of Yaohnanen, who worship, of all people, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and the longtime consort of Queen Elizabeth II. This cult came about thanks to an ancient prophecy about the son of a mountain spirit who travelled far to marry a rich and powerful woman. Sometime in the 1960s, the people of Vanuatu, then known as the New Hebrides, applied this legend to Prince Philip, whose official portrait hung in every colonial administrative office. Their beliefs were further bolstered in 1971 when the Duke, resplendent in his white naval uniform, paid an official visit to the New Hebrides capital of Port Vila. Reports Reportedly amused and honoured by the veneration he received, over the next 50 years, Philip made sure to send his worshippers copies of his official portrait whenever a new one was taken. 3 are known to survive, kept as venerated relics in the home of village chief Jack Malia. One from the 1960s, one from 1980, showing Philip wielding a traditional pig hunting club, and one from 2000. There is a strange irony to this particular cult, given Prince Philip's long history of culturally insensitive comments, as journalist Nick Squires wrote in 2007. He once asked a group of Australian Aborigines if they still threw spears at one another. He inquired of a black British member of Parliament what country he came from, and he advised some British students in China not to stay too long for fear of developing slitty eyes. Nonetheless, when Prince Philip passed away in April 2021, perhaps none mourned harder than his devotees in Yunnan. Tribal leader Chief Yapa sent his condolences to the royal family. The Union Jack was flown at half-mast in front of the Nakamal, or meeting place, and for 2 weeks the local people gathered to perform elaborate funeral rites in honour of the departed Duke, which included dancing, processions, feasts, and the ritual slaughtering of pigs. According to anthropologist Kirk Huffman, with Philip's passing, the group's veneration will likely transfer to his son, Prince Charles. Since the 1950s, the term cargo cult has entered the English lexicon as a metaphor for venerating an object or practice without fully understanding its function. In his 1974 commencement address at Caltech, physicist Richard Feynman coined the term cargo cult science to describe this phenomenon in the field of scientific inquiry. As an example, Feynman cites the famous 1909 oil drop experiment conducted by American physicist Robert Millikan to measure the charge of the electron. Due to an incorrect value for the viscosity of air, Millikan's original results were slightly off from the currently accepted figure. But while subsequent independent experiments eventually honed in on the correct value, they did so in an unnatural way. Rather than having a random distribution around the correct value, these results instead drift incrementally from Millikan's original figures. This, Feynman argues, suggests that scientists were so afraid to contradict Millikan that they rejected any experimental results that deviated too much from his original findings. Other examples of cargo cult science listed by Feynman include leaving out evidence that contradicts a pet theory, only publishing studies with positive results, and overstating the practical applications of research in order to secure funding. The cargo cult metaphor has also made its way into the field of computer science, where cargo cult programming refers to the practice of blindly copy-pasting code or using particular programming structures and protocols without understanding exactly why they are written that way. According to software engineer Steve McConnell, such practices can also worm their way into the very organizational structures and cultures of software companies themselves. These imposter organizations look at successful companies like Microsoft, observe that they generate very little documentation, offer stock options to their employees, and then require them to work mountains of overtime. They conclude that if they too minimize documentation, offer stock options, and require extensive overtime, they will be successful. The less documentation and the more overtime, the better. But these organizations miss the fact that Microsoft and other successful, commitment-oriented companies don't require overtime. They hire people who love to create software. They provide lavish organizational support and rewards for creating software, and then they turn them loose. The natural outcome is that software developers and managers choose to work long hours voluntarily. Imposter organization confuse the effect, long hours, with the cause, high motivation. We call the imposter organizations sweatshops because they emphasize working hard rather than working smart, and they tend to be chaotic and ineffective. They're not very enjoyable to work for either. But while through such metaphors cargo cultism has taken on an almost universally derogatory connotation, anthropologists warn against dismissing these movements as mere primitive superstition or even using the term cargo cult to describe them. Such labels, they argue, greatly oversimplify and generalize a diverse and complex array of cultural movements that emerged in response to the disruption of colonialism. According to Ralph Ranganvani, director of the Vanuatu National Culture Council, cults like this are a way to preserve traditional culture and reject organized religion. There was a great deal of pressure from missionaries for people to abandon their customs and embrace the church. The colonial authorities arrested a lot of the cult leaders, but that only made them grow more. It's still basically a cultural preservation movement. It melds exposure to the West with old belief systems. It served people well. And as quaint and bizarre as dummy airfields, mock US Army drill, and Jon Frum might seem to outsiders, the fundamentals of cargo cult belief, as Kirk Huffman points out, are not all that different to those of traditional Christianity. If you say to the Tannies, "You've been waiting all this time and neither Jon Frum nor Philip has turned up," I'd point out that Christians have been waiting for the return of Jesus for 2,000 years. This is not South Seas mumbo-jumbo. These are strong, vibrant, millennial movements, and they're only getting stronger. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.